I'm Kirsten Mullen. Thank you so much for selecting our book From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century for this year's Sam Ragan Old North State Award for Nonfiction. We are proud to be recognized in our home state by the North Carolina Literary and Historical Association, and we wish to express our gratitude especially to our publisher, the University of North Carolina Press.
And I'm William Darity Jr. My personal roots are in the state of North Carolina. Both of my parents were born and raised in the Old North State, and I have ancestors who were enslaved in North Carolina on both sides of my family. For example, on my mother's side, my great-grandmother, who I knew personally, Tassie Body Jenkins, was the daughter of Robert Body and Lucy Mitchell Body, both of whom were enslaved on Rose Hill Plantation in Nash County.
My roots are in Alabama on my father's side and in Pennsylvania by way of Virginia on my mother's side. My maternal grandmother, Harriet Taliaferro Mitchell, who only passed during the previous decade, was herself the daughter of a man born into slavery, my great-grandfather, Walker Taliaferro. That makes me a member of the third generation since emancipation. On my father's side, I am a member of the fourth freeborn generation.
But we must emphasize that the case for reparations that we make in the pages of From Here to Equality is not limited to slavery. Indeed, we must place on the account for the debt that is owed to Black American descendants of U.S. slavery, in addition, the nearly century-long period of legal segregation in the United States, American apartheid, or what we refer to colloquially as the Jim Crow era. In addition, in the post-civil rights era, there are atrocities that also have to be placed on the account. These include mass incarceration, police executions of unarmed blacks, ongoing discrimination in credit, housing, and employment markets, as well as the immense racial wealth gap in the United States. That gap amounts to a condition in which the average black household has $850,000 less in net worth than the average white household. Corresponding to this condition is a situation in which Black American descendants of U.S. slavery constitute about 13% of the nation's population, but only possess 2.5% of the nation's wealth.
From Here to Equality contains numerous accounts of repressed history. From Reconstruction through the first half of the 20th century, white mob terror against Black Americans was a commonplace. There was the Louisiana Opelousas St. Landry Parish Massacre in 1869. And in the past 30 years, many of us in North Carolina have learned about the Wilmington, North Carolina White Riot in 1898 for the first time. No part of the country was free of these attacks, north and south, Main Street and Country Lane. At least 16 massacres took place in 1910, and in 1919, the year that became known as the Red Summer, not just a summer really, but 18 horrific months, there were at least 30 massacres, massive attacks on Black people and their communities. Elaine, Arkansas in 1919, and every year through the 1920s was marked by white violence. In Ocoee, Florida, 1920, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921, in Rosewood, Florida, 1923, among many others.
So what were these hostile attacks on Black Americans about? Chief among the stated reasons given by whites was a refusal to accede to the demands of Black veterans who had fought in World War I. Black soldiers having put their lives on the line for their country, and in some cases, having been decorated for doing so, were unwilling to return to the Jim Crow laws that had defined their lives from birth. Their decision to question and resist the status quo and to refuse the place they had been assigned led some whites to riot, murder, and destroy or appropriate property belonging to Black people.
In Elaine, Arkansas, Black farmers whose efforts to receive market rates for their cotton crops had been blocked, historically, by local whites who pocketed the profits the farmers might have received had they had access to the open market. With the assistance of several World War I Black veterans, Black farmers in the area developed a plan to form a union and bargain collectively, a plan that outraged the white brokers, and violence ensued.
In From Here to Equality, we emphasize the devaluation of Black lives and provide actual estimates of the magnitude of that devaluation. We discuss prevalent misconceptions about the nation's history, specifically slavery, the Civil War, and Reconstruction, and we discuss misperceptions about the reasons for contemporary racial economic inequality. We present a detailed plan for reparations for Black American descendants of U.S. slavery in the final chapter of our book.
One of the core objectives of From Here to Equality is to contribute to making Black reparations a serious policy consideration via scholarly work instead of a fantasy. This recognition from the North Carolina Literary and Historical Association suggests we have had a strong measure of success in meeting that goal.